All right, hello everybody. I think we're starting. I'm Charles C. Kaler, President of the League of Women Voters of Lane County. Welcome to our April 3rd Thursday, 2021, brought to you virtually with the help of Rhonda Livesey, Terry Parker, and Nancy Mills. A few announcements though before our speaker begins. The League acknowledges we live in the traditional land of the Kalapuya people, whose descendants are citizens of both the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians of Oregon. We honor the land and the people who have cared for it and reaffirm our commitment to steward and honor the land through our work. Next month, we're going to talk a little bit about that, very little. Two important League events will happen. League of Women Voters of Oregon and our Lane County League's annual meeting will both be virtual, elect officers and conduct other business. So check the Argus in your email for more information. Our speaker today is Tod Schneider, Executive Director of the Community Supported Shelters. His career includes 29 years as a crime prevention specialist for the Eugene Police Department. He is an expert on crime prevention through environmental design, particularly for schools. He has consulted widely in the U.S. and elsewhere and now works on promoting safe homeless camp designs. After his presentation, we'll have time for some questions. You can begin to ask now via Q&A if you have them, and we'll save them for after. Mr. Schneider, we are honored to have you with us today. Thank you, and you're up.
Great. Thanks. Let me just get this technology cooperating. And we're up. All right.
Perfect.
So what you see pictured here is an example of the community coming out to help build huts a few years back when we were just getting rolling. We've come a long ways since that first camp. But one of the wonderful things about it is that we really are part of the community. When people talk about homeless camps, they usually, I think, picture something like the picture on the left from underneath Washington Jefferson Bridge just a month ago. And they're horrified at the thought of this going up in their neighborhood, understandably. It represents all the worst of the worst stereotypes of what homelessness is about. But the choice isn't between nothing and putting up with horrible camps. The choice is between horrible camps and good camps. And you don't really have the choice of waving a magic wand and making the homeless population disappear. So given that choice, we believe we are one of the best options out there. We started out by just building huts. We built three things. We built huts, camps, and communities, the three things. And along the way, we developed some key factors in making this all work. The three factors were safety, empowerment, and connectivity. People need to feel safe before you can get anything else really rolling. People need to feel empowered. By the time you're homeless, you're feeling pretty powerless in your life on so many levels and dealing with so many problems that you don't know how to deal with. And you feel really more and more disconnected from your family, from the community, and even from yourself. Bringing people into a hut can turn all of that around. This woman was demonstrating food products at Costco and got laid off and ended up in a hut. So some cool things about the huts. They're low cost. It varies depending on what else you're wrapping into the cost of the hut, but a general figure to work with is about $2,800. They're a big step up from a tent. They're lockable, so you can lock up your belongings, you can lock the window, and you can sleep well at night, not worrying about somebody attacking you while you're asleep. They're 6 by 10 foot with a 4-foot porch added on the front. Porch makes a big difference for being able to help people connect with the world outside the hut. And they are built on site with most of the labor done by volunteers who have grown into this small army of volunteers who have just been amazing. One of the cool things about huts is they can also get introduced as a caretaker option for a property. So whether it's a church or synagogue or mosque or a garage or a health center, there's some real advantages to putting a hut there if you're worried about vandalism or other problems after hours. Now you've got a live person there at no cost to watch things overnight and on the weekends. And they've got your phone number. So it's a pretty good deal for anybody who wants to help and has a problem that needs taken care of like that. When you look at the costs of building huts compared to other options, it's pretty dramatic what you're looking at. We definitely need more conventional housing, no question about that. Permanent structures like the commons on MLK that just got built, they're needed, they're great, but it's $260,000 per unit, per studio apartment. That added up to $13 million to build 51 units. For $13 million, we could build over 1,000 units. So if you are wanting to deal with hundreds or thousands of people on the streets anytime soon, there's no comparison. If we keep building more buildings like the Commons, take you a year to build each one, spend $13 million each time, and it would take you 20 years to get up to 1,000 people. Here is a recent hut build next to a church where they're putting up a microsite, a small site with multiple huts. And that's one version of our camps, but our largest camps are called safe spots, sometimes rest stops, and they hold usually 15 to 20 huts, although that may be changing imminently. And they're small communities. They are nice to live in, and they're nice to see in your neighborhood. We started out with just a few camps up in between 2013 and last year. And then in September, right when I started as director of the agency, the CARES money came down, and suddenly the city and the county were flush with cash and wanted to build fast, wanting everything built by December 30th, which is an insane schedule to get all this done, but we did it. So we've built 5 new camps. They're almost entirely done now. And it took us a little longer than December 30th, but they stuck with us, and we're making great progress on that. So we're opening these new camps. That's Peter from the city manager's office, who's helped us a lot, and a goat that belongs to the caretaker who watched over our site for us. Very friendly, just like a dog. All together now, we will have 155 huts and growing. We just keep building more huts, whether they're independently placed or whether in microsites or in full camps. But this is a huge change. It's 2 or 3 times as many people as we've ever served at one time before. We've got 8 full safe spots. We've got a few microsites. We've got dozens of independent placements. And they're scattered all over town. Up until last year, everything was, for the most part, squeezed into one corner of Whitaker neighborhood. And now it's really spread far, thanks largely to the city really coming on board with this. They've been, city and the council both are smoking at the axles, working as hard as they can to expand and expand and expand. And I've never seen anything like it in my career in Eugene, in terms of the government really embracing the issue of homelessness and addressing it. We started out very, very basic with people in tents, and we even had our first food operation was out of a tent, and then it moved to a bigger tent, and we kept improving it over the years, and now it looks more like this with stainless steel countertops and a real stove that doesn't look like you're camping out. We have a commons building in every camp, and this is critical, especially in the winter times, so that people can connect with each other. They can gather and get warm next to a wood stove. Nothing compares to wood heat for really thawing people out. And then they're able to go back to their huts and hop into bed with a sleeping bag and truly be comfortable to sleep through the night. Even through our occasional harsh winters, this winter was pretty gentle. We've opened up the front wall. We have some sliding doors on them now, but because of COVID, we wanted a way to gather but have maximum ventilation opportunities. So this is what it looks like. This was a commons room just after we opened about a week ago. And for the first time, we built the kitchen into the commons building, which you see against the far wall. This group on the left is our very first campers in the Westmoreland camp, enjoying the wood stove and getting to know each other. And getting to know each other is a huge piece of what this is all about. As I was saying, we build huts, then we build camps, which are collections of huts, and then we add the human piece of it, which is the communities. And this is so important for people reconnecting with themselves and with other people. There's very basic rules that get enhanced by the campers each year and adjusted at each camp to meet their needs. It really boils down to be kind and help out. And that seems to be working pretty well. When people come to us, this is not a crash pad. It's not 3 hots and a cot, and then you're out of here. This is a real commitment. When you come here, you're joining a community of people that are agreeing to work together to pull their lives back together in a pro-social way. So they understand that there's no violence or crime permitted. You have to treat each other with respect. And if you can do that, you have up to a year rent-free, and you've got all kinds of support while you're in there. So one of our sayings is leave the street on the street. This is a new beginning. When people have adjusted to life on the street over years, and for some of them decades, they sometimes learn pretty antisocial behaviors to survive. And they have lost track of how to resolve problems peaceably and how to treat each other with respect. So for a lot of people, it's a real adjustment. Fortunately, we've got a social service team that makes a huge difference. And one of the reasons is that they provide so much one-on-one service. In a lot of kinds of shelters around the country, that's just not an option. They don't have enough staffing. They have so many clients with such severe needs, and it's all they can do to warehouse people. And that's very sad because it's so much harder for people to rebuild their lives. So it's important to us that we make a difference, that this isn't just warehousing people. So we have 3 pieces to our service team. We have a camp facilitator who runs the camp, basically makes sure everything is functional, runs weekly camp meetings where everybody gets together and talks about any issues and resolves them peaceably. We have peer support workers, who I'm very excited about because they're all hired directly out of our camps. These are people who came into the camps because they became homeless. A lot of them just because of financial collapse. They lost a job, they lost a house, or had a medical problem and it bankrupted them. But they're otherwise fairly functional. And for the cream of the crop, those folks who really have great people skills, we hire them and they become part of this team, and they are so much more effective than somebody who doesn't have that street credibility. When people meet them and they say, yeah, I'm on staff here. I lived in one of these camps over the past year and then I got hired. It's really cool. I'm excited to be here. I love what we do. And people feel so comforted by that. They feel safe. They feel like these are people who are going to understand what they're going through. And it's very powerful. And then finally, we have Navigators. And the Navigators specialize in connecting people with needed resources. So the facilitator and or the peer support worker may build rapport with this person enough for them to say, I really need this kind of medical attention, or I got this terrible toothache, or I need to reconnect with my family. And the Navigators help make it happen. The clients throughout this process are expected to be making a plan for rebuilding their life with support from everybody listed here. And they're going to meet with these people on a regular basis, one-on-one, on average weekly. And those staff people are going to be saying, so how's it going? What's your plan? Nothing is going to be forced upon the client at all. The client is in charge of the plan. It's part of the empowerment piece. So the client may say, I think the best thing for me is to go reconnect with my family back east. Or I think I just need help getting on my VA benefits or disability benefits. Or I just need to find some work again, or I need to get my ID. So they make a plan, and then we're checking in every week and saying, how's it going? So it doesn't end up being just a pipe dream that's overwhelming because they don't know how to get to the office, or they can't keep track of their appointments. If they have traumatic brain injury, which is not unusual, especially with vets, they can't remember these things. So having somebody there for them makes a huge difference. So we build the huts, camps, and communities. We use these to reinforce safety and empowerment and connectivity for the people that we're serving. And as a result, when people leave, they leave on a staggered basis throughout the year, and new campers move in. 2 out of 3 of the people who leave move on to better circumstances. They find their own home or their job, or they reconnect with family, or whatever it is they need to do, but it gets them off the streets of Eugene. And that's what we do. So with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. That's great. I'm fascinated. One of the things that came to my mind was, what's the difference between a rest stop, a microsite, the independent? Can you define that for me, please?
Oh, absolutely. So there's a few ways that the huts come into play. At the most basic level, if you wanted to provide shelter for a homeless person on your property, business or private property, we can put one on that property. And depending on the circumstances, it might be that you buy one from us, or in some circumstances, we even put them there at our own cost and take them back later if you're no longer using them. If you go through the St. Vincent de Paul program, we have a partnership with them where they will screen potential homeless campers, and then they will turn to you or your group, church groups, especially in Eugene, and say, okay, we've got somebody who says that sounds like a good fit for them. Would you like to interview a few people who have applied? And then the hosts interview these people and choose which of the 3 people they interview they're going to take in. Now, I like to see at least 2 huts at a site for mutual protection, because I don't want to leave somebody, especially if they're fragile mentally or physically, all by themselves to guard your property. But this has worked really well with those host situations, and they get someone watching over them. So the next level up from that is going to be a microsite. And that's where you say, our group wants to take in a bunch of huts, but we don't want to get carried away. How about a microsite? A microsite is a maximum of 6 huts, and it doesn't require city council approval. So it's just a little bit easier to cut through the red tape, but otherwise tries to provide similar resources to what we put in a full camp. And then the largest camp, oh, sorry?
Well, can you tell us, can you give me an example of where is that like on a church parking lot, or what type of site would that look like, a microsite?
It could be any place. One of the nice things about it is it doesn't need as much space, so you can squeeze it in to otherwise small lots. The one that we are building right now is at Graham Field at 22nd and Polk, and that should be getting up and running within the month. The neighborhood group has really come forward championing getting a microsite in their neighborhood. So we are grateful to see people overcoming the not in my backyard fears and welcoming campers in. Then the full-size camp is up to 20. It starts with 15, it moves up to 20. The city council just on Monday night said, let's make these encampment spaces bigger, up to 40 tents or up to 60 cars for car camping areas. What's not entirely clear if they're referring to our safe spots or some other model. Right now, underneath Washington Jefferson Bridge, anybody who's driven through there can't help but notice an enormous development of very lightly managed camps with people putting up their tents. It's so far actually functioning a whole lot better than anything we've done in the years past, because at least we've got the porta potties there, and we've got the garbage service there, and that makes a huge difference. And there is some very minimal staffing, but there are staff who are paying attention. And so far, I think the city is moving forward with a neighborhood agreement with encampments such as that. Just asks people to be good neighbors. And we'll see how long this lasts. I watch with some trepidation. Our version is far more managed and far more secure, and that works for us. But we are happy to see anything pop up that serves the community.
I have a question here that asks, are there sites in Springfield or other parts of Lane County that are supported by CCS?
CSS only has a major presence here in Eugene. In Springfield, we've seen a toe in the water here and there, but they're still somewhat resistant, I guess, politically. But some of the churches over there do have huts in their parking lot and got permission to do that. So it's slow going.
What's a rest stop?
A rest stop is just another word for a safe spot. No difference at all.
Okay. Then what's the criteria for choosing someone to be part of the camp?
Great question. People apply to be in the camps. And when they do that, they fill out a fairly extensive 2 or 3 page form that asks a lot of personal questions, like, are you struggling with a mental illness? Are you on medications? Do you have physical problems? And we get a lot of clues about their issues there. They're then placed on a waiting list, and up until now, that's usually been a 2 or 3 month waiting list, which is far more responsive than what happens when you get on the affordable housing waiting list. That's like 5 years, and then that's a lottery. So with this, you're probably going to get in, but it may be a few months. I think over the next month or two, we'll be able to move a lot of people a lot faster because we've opened so many new beds right away. So they fill out that form, and then they largely get placed first come, first served, but we have some latitude there. If there is somebody with a very severe crisis going on, an urgency that moves them to the top of the line, if, for example, they're recovering from surgery and they have no way to get into a nursing home and they're able to manage in the camp, then we'll try to accommodate somebody like that right away rather than say you have to wait. Or if they are actively fleeing from domestic violence, that would be taken into account. So then we place the initial group, maybe a half a dozen campers, 6 or 7, like you saw pictured around their wood stove. They get us started. And we try to start with a group that is showing really high promise for making it work. They are fairly sociable. They understand the concept of getting along and being part of a community, and they're motivated to do that. They establish the culture of the community, and then we trickle in people after them. You might only get a person a week, but establishing that that community, that sense of community, is absolutely critical in making this work. And we've learned this the hard way, because in the early days we would just let anybody in, and we let them all in at once, and that is really hard to steer or to influence. But for the most part, once you've established a pro-social culture, a new person who comes in just adapts to it. They get a sense of the lay of the land, and they say, oh, that's how it works here. And so we've been pretty happy with that.
Well, I knew this question would come up. We have such smart leaguers. What about long-term funding? And then as a follow-up to that, where does the funding for social services follow-up come from? Is it part of the city budget?
Really good questions there. So up until now, we have been much more weighted towards donations that have helped us survive all of these years, and we continue to rely on that to keep things afloat. And that's been just amazing. The community support is absolutely amazing. Just this past 6 months, though, our world got turned upside down with the CARES COVID money that paid for building these 5 new camps and providing all of the social services associated with that over the next year. So it's a dream come true in some ways. It would be a better dream come true if it also covered our overhead, which didn't really get covered under that plan, but we're trying to get that addressed for any future development. What happens next is the scariest part. We don't really know for sure. The county and the city have both funneled money into this, and they're both committed to supporting us in years to come, with the caveat that they've got no control over a lot of the financial factors either. They don't know what money is going to trickle down from the feds or the state, and what budget priorities are going to shift. So all we now have is goodwill, fingers crossed that it's going to work. We may get to the end of the year and only then find out what's happening next year. So it's a little anxiety producing, and we're trying to roll with it and hope that everybody recognizes that compared to the cost of leaving them on the streets and putting them in hospitals and jails and watching them die, that our program makes much more sense, especially since it's already been built. You've covered that infrastructure cost, and now you're spending maybe $5,000 per person for an entire year of one-on-one services.
My daughter used to have a job that kept people out of the emergency room because the average cost was about $25,000 a pop. So I can see where this would be really something that people ought to consider. Pay for it now at a lower cost, or pay for it later at a much greater cost. So interesting point here. One of our leaguers said that she saw on the road a burned out RV just past but just past it on the vacant land, a van with cooking or grill going outside, a porta potty, and I believe some actual fencing around it. Would that qualify for a hut?
Well, it depends on where it is. Um, if it's, I mean, if it's in the city of Eugene or any place where the municipality approves it, you can put it up. We get calls from all over the country and around the world asking about how to do this. And one of the things that comes up frequently is frustration from advocates who say, you know, my city just says it can't be done. And the reason is it's against city code. And then they wipe their hands of it. And what I like to reinforce in response to that is a good response to your city councilor is, I'm glad that you're up on top of the city codes. My understanding is that the codes were written by city councilors. That's your job, right? And when they admit that that's their job, you say, and I would assume that part of that is fixing old city codes once they become antiquated or they aren't serving our needs. And that's hard to argue about. And so thank you, City Councilor, for clarifying that for me. I would assume that now you're going to help me adjust the city code to permit this. And now they can't just walk away from this and wash their hands of it. They're going to have to put up or shut up. But to
Hit the
blame it
heart
on
of
the
the
code,
You've hit the heart
easy
of the
out.
League of, I'm sorry. You've
Go
hit the
ahead.
heart of the League of Women Voters. That's what you have to do. You have to be careful when you vote and understand what the issues are and what the candidate proposes. By the way, that questioner about the burned out RV, she said it was in the city of Eugene. So,
City of Eugene. So
mhm.
it would depend a little bit on exactly where it is. There's actually a guy in town who comes up with free RVs for people um, that he rebuilds. So that would be one angle that the person in the RV could pursue. But in terms of a hut, it just would have to be a place that is open to having a hut put there. So you can't put it on the street, but you can put it on private property if the owner invites you. Or if they make friends with a local business and say, hey, I'll be your caretaker. Um, that's a fairly easy path that would be an option. Once we get all our camps built, we're on hold on our individual hut placements until probably mid-May at the soonest.
We have many more questions here. What about showers, toilets? Who cooks the food and buys the groceries? How does that work?
Yeah, more good questions. Showers are a huge challenge. And I know I'm dysfunctional if I don't have a shower every day. So I'm really spoiled. Our campers can go a week in between showers. And I would have trouble functioning well like that and going out and getting a job and working every day. So we're extremely aware of this. And in response, we were able to borrow a shower trailer just this past fall and test that out. And it was extremely successful. It just was clear that it was going to fall to pieces at the rate that we were using it. It just wasn't up. It wasn't industrial strength. So we started looking for what our alternatives were. And we thought we were going to build a shower building on the one site that we own the property on. And it just became cost prohibitive. We have one or two donors who are very generously offering to cover uh, at least the initial costs that we first thought it was going to run. We first thought it was going to be as low as $60,000, and it just about doubled or tripled, and we backed off of that. So right now we're researching a trailer, a shower trailer again, this one a little more industrial strength. And once we figure figure out the actual costs on that, which I should know Monday. We will then figure out if we can afford it. And if we still need help doing that, we will love it if people send their checks our way.
I'll give you a chance to repeat this at the end, but how can someone volunteer and how can someone donate?
So you would contact our office at 1160 Grant and say, how can I sign up? Or you can go to our website and there is a link you can click on for volunteering. That's communitysupportedshelters.org. That's probably the most convenient way. And tell us what you'd like to contribute, whether it's your time and energy or cash or something that you think we could use.
Very good. So go to your website, right?
That's a great way to do it.
Very good. And
That's
say,
1160 Grant with a T at the end.
right. But the website address, do you know? Or what can we Google?
Yeah, that's communitysupportedshelters.org.
Right, very good. This is a little bit of crystal ball gazing, but do you foresee more opportunities for job training placement as the economy gets stronger?
Well, I hope so. We hire a handful of people this year, and that was fantastic, but we can't hire everybody. Workforce Oregon out of the employment office focuses on finding jobs for homeless people, and we're hoping that we can build that relationship with them. It's anybody's guess, though, what the economy is going to do, and homeless people have to compete against housed people for positions, and that's always a struggle, especially if you've had a rough past and you've just put yourself back together again.
What other communities besides Eugene need sites? I'm assuming everybody, but as you point out, there are cities that don't really want to deal with it. So have you run into that much locally?
Well, Eugene is golden compared to most places around the country. We're really setting a standard with the safe spots, and I fully expect to get deluged with requests as the word gets out and as we prove to be successful. But the calls come from everywhere. We've had a half a dozen calls from different cities in California over the past few months. Walla Walla built their own camp based on our model, and that's been thriving. We got a call from a veteran in Kansas last week, and he's going to build a camp based on our model. A pastor up in Canada a couple months ago called and consulted with us about doing that in his hometown, where he already built a hut, and now he wants to expand and build a full camp. So they come from just everywhere. We get queries from Venezuela and Germany and Australia. And I wish that we could figure out how to go there and help. But I think that over the next year, we're going to really work at using our relatively new technology, Zoom, to make it a lot easier for distant communities to communicate with us, and we can show them how to build huts and run camps and let them talk to campers. And it could be a game changer over the next year, but we have to finish building our new huts and camps and serving them first before we can go there.
It'd be nice if you could put your show on the road somehow, but but I see that there's quite a bit of difficulty. Another question here is, what is the cost of your huts versus the tiny homes? I'm assuming quite a bit of difference.
Generally speaking, a hut is about half the price. And of course the tiny homes can range from $5,000 to $100,000, depending on who you're paying and how fancy they want to get about it. Uh, Another one of the big differences is that ours are, at least in Eugene, treated as a temporary um, vehicle, actually, to fit into the code. We got imaginative at the city council level. That goes back to how you write your city codes.
You don't have to have an
Whereas
axle. You don't have to have
don't
an
even,
axle.
no wheels or axles, like a skid.
Okay.
Um, we don't really design them to move around, but it works for the code, which specifies them as being acceptable, just like an RV. Um, but for tiny house, you're taking things up a step. You're usually in a more permanent site where you're going to plumb it and wire it, and that gets into a whole different realm in terms of city code issues and what's required.
How long are the huts projected to last? How long do they last?
Well, the roofing material that we use now is a 30-year guarantee on it. So that material is great. We have little things that need repair every few years. There'll be minor repairs that are necessary, and we have a maintenance team that goes around and keeps things working. But they are pretty durable. They're going to hold up for years and years,
Really?
um, as long as they're maintained.
Someone else has asked, what happens to the third of the residents who do not move out of the camps into better circumstances? What sort of
Yeah,
project? Go ahead.
that part's really tough. There's some people who just aren't ready or willing, or they're so broken uh, that it's just overwhelming for them. And it's heartbreaking when people are severely mentally ill or severely addicted, and they can't work around that. They can't move past it. We can't keep them forever, but we're doing our best to give them a taste of that. Some of them will come back to us a year or two later, and they'll say, "Yeah, I wasn't ready then, but now I've gone through detox and I'm ready." Some people will leave, and we will help arrange that. We'll say your behavior in camp based on your addiction has been so antisocial, we can't keep you. But if you agree to go into detox at Buckley House and one into their residential programs, we will move you to the head of the line if you make it through there and you need to come back in. So sometimes that'll work for people. The research that I've seen lately, working with chronic mentally ill homeless, uh, is really reinforcing that our general approach is a good one. It's that one-on-one support as you get people through your program and then out into the community, and you slowly wean them off of that, that has made a big difference in studied sites. Uh, However, they're also using people with sufficient advanced training, medical social workers, people who can prescribe meds and keep an eye on them as part of that team. So it's a little bit more expensive than our approach.
Another really good question here was that I don't totally understand, so I hope you do. What sort of project evaluation will be or is being done? And because statistics are important in this business to validate the funding. So
The most important statistic that we track is what's the end result for the people going through the program. And we keep data on that. And what it's showing is that when people are ready to leave or it's time to leave, 2 out of 3 of them are going to better circumstances. So that's a 60 to 70% success rate in our mind. And when you compare that to people coming out of other kinds of facilities, especially jails or mental health facilities, I think that we're doing twice as well as they are in terms of having success.
very good. we're skipping around here on topics a little bit. Who pays for the land? I imagine that varies, right?
Well, we've been fortunate in Eugene that the city has really stepped up on this and provided free land. So that is not costing us anything. The Eugene Mission also gave us a piece of property at very nominal cost to put our camp on. And then we have one site that we actually bought and have one camp there.
Um, and do you need volunteer help other than with building the huts?
Well, we are always trying to figure out how best to use volunteers. And what's really helpful is if you have a particular skill, when you go to the website, if you can include that, you just never know when we're looking for that exact skill. We've had tremendous success with hiring people who thought they were retired, and but including myself, we so yearned for something to be doing that was meaningful and where it was a pleasure to go to work and you could see that you were really helping people rebuild their lives, that people either end up volunteering or in some cases get hired to use that particular skill. I talked to a financial planner this morning that we're going to be talking to next week. We could probably use a human resources professional if somebody is expertise in that area. So various topics like that come up, volunteer coordinating, for example. But we also use people for construction and maintenance, curtain making, all kinds of things.
I believe one of our leaguers asked for material to make curtains.
Oh, good.
So I think she got a lot of donations for the fabric. So here's one I'm really curious about is, are there sites for women and children?
We tried having a women's camp for a while and it just didn't work out. So we've gone back to mixed gender camps all around. And we don't take kids in because the trade-off is that we are bringing in people who are sometimes troubled and sometimes have criminal backgrounds. If we wouldn't take people in who had criminal backgrounds, that would defeat the purpose for a pretty significant chunk of the people that we take care of. So we had to make a trade-off that would keep kids safe at the same time that we were providing shelters. And the toughest people to place are these single adults.
Okay, and I think we didn't hear how you handle groceries and cooking.
Yeah. So I'm hoping this week to hear about a grant that might change how we're doing the food. And we've actually got 3 grant applications out that are all supposed to give me a response this month. So that could change the picture. For a while, we were a mix of essentially a few sources. One is that most of our campers do get the equivalent of food stamps. So they are able to get basic groceries and it's nothing fancy, but it's enough to get by. And then we will connect them with things like the dining room downtown for hot meals occasionally, but we have a kitchen that they can use that's part of the camp. Then we have also gotten donations from Food for Lane County regularly in the past and from the Eugene Mission. And we get some donations from some grocery stores like Trader Joe's. And all of that has been very helpful. It is, the food piece is on hold right now because we've had to focus on building all these new camps and it's kept us so busy. So we'll be revisiting that after sometime after the start of May, especially if these grants come through, then we would have a lot more to work with.
Very good. One of my particular interests was I thought I saw a one of the gentlemen in a wheelchair in one of the photos. Uh, I can see that the huts are not accessible for someone with a wheelchair. Do you have accessibility issues or ways to get around that?
Yeah, we put ramps on huts on an as needed basis. So we have a few that are already set up that way, and we can get one out and add it to a ramp in the same day, added to the hut. So that is easily addressed at this point.
And, one of our leaguers visited a camp and questioned the fencing around it. Can you explain why that's done?
Yes, that's a really good question. The first time I saw the fencing around a camp, I was also a little put off and saw it as containing these people. What I didn't understand was that the walls of a camp are like the walls of your house. And if we told you that you can build a house, but you can't have any walls because it costs too much money, and we expect you to be in charge of what goes on in that house, and then somebody else comes in overnight and commits a crime, and then we come to your house and we say, you are a really bad housekeeper. How could you let this happen? You'd be horrified at being blamed for this. But that's what it's like being in a homeless camp with no walls. You have no power to control who's coming in and what they're doing. And how can we expect you to be responsible for that space? So that people feel safer with that fencing. Sometimes for the first time, they feel safer in their locked hut, and they feel safer that they can be in their yard, in their community room, and they're not going to have some strangers slipping in and stealing their bicycles.
Yeah, it's not so much to keep them in, but keep others out, to feel secure.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Um, I was thinking of maybe saving this to last. So, well, someone asks, have you worked with the military at all to use their expertise and understanding of a sector of your clients? I'm assuming like PTSD or other issues.
We have one camp that is exclusively for veterans, and that's one of our oldest camps. It's on the Eugene mission property, and it works really well. And the vets really like having their own camp. They keep it neat as a pin, and the people who are staffing it are all connected. They're veterans themselves or closely connected to veterans. And in fact, one of our most recent hires was out of that camp, and he is continuing as a peer support worker for them.
I know that works with vet centers, that when they began, counselors were combat vets, and that engendered more trust about the process. So
Yeah.
it makes sense. So
I forgot to mention also, just to back up for a second, in terms of food, that we have had occasionally somebody from the community who says, I want to do a meal and arrange some kind of a donation where they're going to feed everybody in the camp. And that's a neat thing that a group can do, especially one of our board members provided a dinner over Easter for one of the camps and fed everybody in the camp. So we're open to being creative around that. One thing also that's important to know is that anything that we do for a camp, with the camp, we have to always remind ourselves that we are empowering the campers to make decisions. So people eagerly come to us saying something like, I want to teach a yoga class. And the answer is not going to be, okay, we'll set it up. The answer is we'll ask the campers if they would like that. So they're in charge of what happens next.
very good. Another sort of crystal ball gazing question is, are these type of communities meant to be permanent in Eugene?
Are they meant to be permanent? Not really. I think we kind of got our foot in the door with seeing this as a temporary arrangement. So there is room there for presumably the city to, at some point in the future, discover a better use for that property and evict us. We're hoping that won't happen anytime soon. I think that the city and us understand that the longer we stay, the the better the value of the investment of building a whole camp. It's a lot of trouble to tear it down and move it somewhere. It's kind of a big project. So it's indefinite how long they're going to stay at this point.
Because beyond the huts, it's the common space and the fences. It makes sense that it would be tough to move. I think you've answered this to a degree about your employees. Are there many that have been unhoused to have that experience?
I'm very pleased to say that at least half of our employees, and right now we have 27 employees, have been homeless themselves. And out of the last 8 people that we've hired, I'd say at least 6 were hired directly out of our camps.
Very good. That's pretty powerful right there. That's wonderful. I'm going to give you some time, and this I think will be our last question. In your view, what is the single most important thing that should be done to prevent homelessness in the first place?
Wow.
I know, just a little question here at the end.
Yeah. Well, everybody comes to homelessness on a different path. And affordability of shelter, I think, is the one biggest missing piece, that people are trying to survive on minimum wage. And in most parts of the country, that's not enough to live on, especially if you have a family, if you have kids. And so there's a lot of magical thing that goes into pretending that people can live on bare survival funds somehow, or somehow rationalizing, expecting people to triple up in order to survive. And until we address that, I don't think there's any way to avoid a continuing army of homeless.
Well, that was a quicker answer than I expected. I see one I've missed, and I think it's probably easier to answer. Does each camp have a full-time host? They don't, do they? That lives there?
They don't have full-time staff living in the camp. We have at least one person at each camp, usually, that is a point person, so that we can reach someone easily by phone. But other than that, once you've established the sense of community there, everybody helps out. And they take turns at different jobs. And if it develops that they need someone to be a point person that's kind of like a host for visitors, they work it out amongst themselves.
That's wonderful. That's great. We're honored to have you with us today. Thank you. That was our last answer. And thank you, Tod, for your work that you've done for this community and to make it a better place. The League particularly appreciates your effort. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Very good. And for the rest of y'all, please tune in next third Thursday in May. Our speaker then will be Sid Vanderkar, Eugene 4J Superintendent. Goodbye, onward, and in good health, and stay that way. Thank you.